Howdy. This is a lecture on the Depression and on FDR, as in Franklin Delano Roosevelt. When Hoover became president, at his inauguration speech in 1929, he can be quoted as saying, "Ours is a rich land, filled with millions of happy homes. In a nation such as ours, the fruits of our accomplishments are secure." That was in January of 1929. He was saying that we were a rich nation, a happy nation, a wealthy nation, a secure nation, ready to take on the world. 10 months later, all of that goes down the toilet. October of 1929, we have an event known as Black Tuesday, where in just a matter of hours, billions, over 10 billions of dollars worth of investments, of securities, of stocks, gone, wiped out. In 2008, we had a bit of a crash, and a lot of people lost their savings, some people up to 2/3 of their savings. In 1929, you didn't just lose your savings, you lost everything. Everything. Within 3 years, 100,000 people every single week were being fired from their jobs, laid off. The national income had been cut in half. Over 1 million people were living homeless in what was known as Hoovervilles. These were particularly prevalent around large cities. When people were wiped out, they would take their children. There were no shelters. They would gather together whatever scrap materials they could find and build themselves shacks just outside of the city. In March of 1933, now you've got FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." The country needed to be bolstered. So let's go back. What was the crash? What happened in October of 1929? It's a New York Stock Exchange crash. New York Stock Exchange is located on Wall Street. The movie Leonardo DiCaprio about Wall Street. There's all sorts of movies about Wall Street. The origin of the name of Wall Street is when the colonists came over and they settled in New York City, and they built along that street. They physically constructed a wall at the end of it to barricade themselves from the Indians that lived on the other side of it. Now here's the thing. While Hoover was still president in 1928, 1927, right around those years, there were 3 indicators. Let me say that again. There were 3 indicators that should have alerted economists. We have a problem. There is a definite problem, and we need to see the writing on the wall. 3 problems. Number 1, new construction had fallen dramatically. New construction had fallen dramatically. Number 2, businesses that had items to sell, those items are sitting in their warehouses. There's way too much overstock. Number 3, you know why there's a lot of overstock? Because people aren't buying. A decline in consumerism. So number 1, cut back in construction. Number 2, too much inventory. And number 3, no one's buying. These 3 items, they carry forward to today. At any time, you can look to see how's new construction, what are warehouse inventories sitting at, and are people buying? It was a flawed economy. A flawed economy going into 1929. So when Hoover gets up there and says, "We are a nation that is flourishing," there should have been a red light blinking. There should have been bells going off saying, no, we are not. Farmers. Farmers were hurting. They had large surpluses of food, declining prices. They've got this food that they've produced, they've harvested, they're not getting the money from it. Their living costs are going up. This is also a time when Ford had developed the tractors, and the farmers, they're able to produce more because they have better technology, so they can plant more, harvest more, have more to sell. Only, yeah, people aren't buying. In 1929, 40% of the families in the nation, their annual income was $1,500 or less. There was no spending power. The rich, it was one of those situations where the rich was getting richer because they were investing. When you have a whole lot of capital, a lot of cash, a surplus of cash, it's not good to sit with cash. You need to invest it in something. It's all for tax reasons. So they invested in real estate, but they invested in speculation. And speculation, the way speculation works, I have land. I'm going to sell you the land. You're going to be a speculator. You're going to buy my land for pretty cheap. And you're speculating. You are guessing that that land value is going to go up and that you're going to build on it, and you are speculating you're going to get a much greater return. That was happening all over the nation. That was how people were investing, was on speculation. They were betting, basically. They were gambling. They were betting that they're going to get a really good return on what they just bought. Now, the other problem, it's much more complicated what was happening on New York Stock Exchange. I'm going a little too fast. I'm tripping on my own tongue. What was happening on the New York Stock Exchange? People would buy stocks, sell them for a greater price before they'd even paid for them, and this can't happen anymore, but this was what was happening back then, and this is what got us into trouble. So the books were never catching up to what was actually going on. When Black Tuesday, October 1929, when Black Tuesday occurred, and it became evident that this country was in a heap load of trouble, President Hoover, he took measures to try and revive the economy and try to help out the victims, but he refused to give direct aid. He wasn't going to do any kind of handouts. He did not want to make people dependent upon the government. This whole welfare system, all of these, I know a lot of people truly are in need, but it was never the Founding Fathers' intentions to set up a government so huge, so overseeing, that the people turned to the government. The people were supposed to turn to each other. Hoover did not have a very good image during this Depression. People would say that he was out of touch, and he claimed that, well, no one's actually starving. Yeah, wrong. Watch the movie Cinderella Man. It was pretty good, showing you the conditions. It's actually about a boxer. I thought, I'm not really going to get into this movie, but it was pretty darn good. And people did starve. There were food lines, there were bread lines, there were soup lines, but not government run. So Roosevelt gets elected, and primarily on the idea that he's going to effect change. I mean, we were in dire, dire need. And here's the thing. The Depression did not just occur here in the United States. It was worldwide. And because it was worldwide, that is why it lasted so long. Had it just occurred in one spot, one nation, it's probable that that nation would have pulled itself out a little quicker than what happened, but because everybody was in the same boat, it was bad. So Roosevelt, um, being a Democrat, Hoover, Republican, it was quite, it was, it could have been predicted. A Republican's not going to take the seat because everyone's going to feel that a Republican was in office when the crash occurred, therefore Republicans are no good. So let's bring a Democrat in. And FDR is going to campaign on the New Deal, that he's got something brand new that's going to turn this nation around. He pledged to find a new deal for the Americans. Excuse me, I have to turn my pages. One of the things that he did was he utilized new technology, the radio. He had fireside chats, and maybe you would live in a community. Let's say there's 100 people in your community, and 20 of them had radios. Well, the neighbors would come over. When it was known that FDR was going to be broadcasting live on the radio, everyone gathered around those radios, and they felt like he's talking to me right here in my living room, or in my case, in my kitchen. One of the first things he had to talk about was the bank crisis. When the stock exchange crashed, banks went bankrupt. Everyone went running to the banks to try and withdraw their money. Now that's one of the situations. The movie It's a Good Life, that Christmas movie with Jimmy Stewart, and the bank's going down because everyone takes out their money, and now the bank has no more money to pay everybody else because they don't keep that much cash in their vaults. It goes to the treasury, and it just doesn't work that way. So the banks have collapsed, and people have lost their faith in their government, and they're scared. They're downright scared. How am I going to survive? So he addresses this issue, the bank crisis. And what he did was he suspended all banking. He said, basically, this is what he said in a fireside chat. Folks, trust me. Give me your trust. Give me 3 months. Give me 3 months. I'm going to close the banks down. Hang in there. Hang in there with me while we restructure. And when we open in 3 months, we will be sound. And the people believed him. He really, yeah, there was some restructuring, there was some reformatting, but when you look at the overall picture, not that much. It was more, trust me, hang on, and they didn't really know what he did. They just believed that in 3 months we're sound. So in 3 months, those doors reopened. People did not run to the bank. Instead, what little bit that they had, they believed him when he said, we're back in business, folks, and we're better than ever, and we're gonna be okay. So they started bringing their money back. That makes the banks fiscal once again. So that's the first thing on his agenda. He's got a few other things he's got to handle, and that would be in the business arena. June 1933. Now, I'm not a big tester on dates, but this way, when I tell you dates, if there's a date I really need you to remember, I'm going to let you know. But I want you to know some of the programs that he put in, because a lot of them, they've had lasting impacts on what you see today. June of 1933, the NIRA, that stands for National Industrial Recovery Act. You might want to write that one down. NIRA, National Industrial Recovery Act. It was meant to get businesses to cooperate with the government, to set comprehensive price agreements, to set production limits, quantities. It set up decent wage scales. But the NIRA really got the government more involved in the business side. It got more government controls over business. It is during FDR's administration that we're going to see a lot of the beginnings, the foundations of where we are today. Now, the NIRA, that last word act, that means it's a document. That means the NIRA is what's setting up the guidelines. It's what's saying here's what needs to happen. But then you have to have someone to make it happen. And that would be the NRA, not to be confused with National Rifle Association. This is something totally different. This is the NRA, National Recovery Administration. These people are going to oversee, these people are going to take the document and make sure that it's being implemented. It had mixed results because most businessmen start out with nothing, build themselves up to something, and they've done it all themselves, not with government assistance. So to have the government come in and say, here's the way I need you to run your business, is not going to go over real well. Now remember I told you how the farmers, they were really having a hard time during this depression because they had bought the new technology, they were able to plow larger fields, plant more, harvest more, but with a national income of $1,500, people aren't buying. You would think that food would be the number one priority, but the number one priority is having a place to live, paying your rent, not getting kicked out. Food comes second. So he's got a lot of farmers, very upset farmers at what's going on with the economy. And this is where you get the AAA, not to be confused with AAA, the automobile. This AAA is the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Again, another document that is going to set up guidelines on how to handle this situation. And the situation was so bad that farmers were on the verge of revolting. We almost had a revolution. You know how we had a revolution to set up this country? We almost had a revolution to take down this government in the 1930s. And it's not going to just be the farmers. It's going to be World War I veterans who we're going to see. They're going to be really disgruntled. I'm not going to talk about that in this lecture. But yeah, 1930s were a rough time. So the farmers, they need to reduce production. They need to raise their prices on their products. FDR's administration came up with the idea that let's pay them not to grow anything. Now, if any of you are farmers out there and your families have benefited from this, I apologize if I sound a little not pleased, but it does rub against the grain of most people to, well, to get a paycheck for not working. I understand that's welfare, but this is a different situation. The government would pay the farmers to just let their fields sit. And here's where FDR is going to take a lot of flack. We had a starving nation. How about instead of paying them to not grow anything, let's pay them for the surplus. Then everybody's happy. Pay them for the surplus, let them work, let them plant their crops, let them harvest. Okay, they can't sell it all at market, so you're willing to pay them anyhow. How about you buy that and take that food and distribute it? Seems like a good idea to me. Oh, by the way, I happen to love the United States. I am a bona fide redneck. Oh, well, all right, 80% redneck. Love the United States. I have traveled extensively outside of the United States. This is where I want to live. So if it sounds like I'm really knocking the United States, I'm not knocking the United States. I knock government government policies. I am a little sarcastic sometimes. I am a little jaded. I am also 57 years old, and I've lived a while, and I've seen, what works, what doesn't work. I've seen how hard my husband and I have worked. Um, so sometimes I am a little sarcastic about our government, but not about my country. So don't ever mistake me for being unpatriotic. I just had to throw that in as a disclaimer. During the Depression, a lot of people living in rural areas, they're living out in the back country, they're not going to get any help at all. They're really on their own, and they really do suffer. Now, one of the programs that was set up, it's called the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority. Tennessee Valley Authority brought electricity to some of the southern states and to areas that had never had electricity, and without electricity you can't have industry, you can't have development. So it was thought that if we raise the standard of living in these areas, we might be able to get a better quality of life. It was set up by the government, but it became a public corporation. It improved the standard of living in over 40,000 square miles. That covers about 7 states. So if you go to your textbook, which I'm saying you do not have to read chapter 22, you're going to find other programs like the Conservation Corps. It was during FDR's administration that Route 75, 80, 90, all these interstates, they're going to get built. He's going to put a lot of men to work. They're going to get paid $10 a month to work, but they're going to be fed 3 very small square meals a day, and then they're going to be told, look, we're feeding you, we're housing you, so take that $10 that you get paid and send it back home. Help out your family. These roads that were built across the nation were built so that tanks, the lanes are wide enough so that tanks could go down the roads. It was built with the military in mind, that there might be a need in the future for movement, military movement. A lot of parks are going to be constructed, and a lot of public works will get done during FDR's administration. Now let's go to a totally different area for his administration. That's going to be, how does he handle the courts, the legal side of all of this? And here's where he's going to get his greatest criticism. Excuse me, my notes are up against my screen, so if I keep moving it, it's because my notebook keeps moving my screen. By the way, this is the first time I've ever done one of these, so bear with me. Thanks. In 1937, and before I state this, FDR is going to be the only president that gets to serve 3 terms, because we're going to come up with World War II, and the country did not want to change presidents during the war. So he'll be the only one that does serve these 3 terms. But in 1937, he did something that really upset a lot of people. It's called court packing. He wanted to get a bill passed where he wanted to force judges, Supreme Court judges, to have to retire at the age of 70. When you receive an appointment to the Supreme Court, sorry, my screen just went into sleep mode. When you receive an appointment to the Supreme Court, that's for life. Doesn't matter if the next president who comes in is of a different party, you keep your job. Well, FDR wasn't happy with that. He pretty much told the judges that were on the bench at the time that if you don't retire, if you don't agree to retire at the age of 70, I'm going to add a judge. I'm going to add a judge of my own choosing. And given that there were so many 70-year-old or nearly 70-year-old judges, we would have gone from 9 judges to 15 judges. So the extra 6 all would have been selected by FDR, which meant he would have been able to pack that bench all with handpicked men, no women yet, with men, and pretty much been assured that if there were any issues that had appeared before the Supreme Court, they were going to vote however he wanted them to vote. This went beyond executive power. It was too much for the voters to stomach. It was too much for Congress to handle. And they stood up to him. But the judges who were on the board at the time, many of them went ahead and retired. They were pressured. So I don't know if you're aware that President Obama has overstepped his executive powers by allowing the Guantanamo Bay detainees, 5 terrorists, to go back home without asking for congressional approval. He basically broke presidential law. FDR tried to break presidential law. And here's where I have to say, why aren't we standing up to this? Why didn't they stand up to FDR back then? Instead, the judges retired. They were put under pressure. FDR will end up with 7 of his own appointed judges on the bench without ever getting the bill passed, because Congress said no way. But through other means, he was able to pressure those judges off the bench, and he got 7 placed. This does not go over too well. So let's assess the New Deal. We have a depression, which puts the country in massive need for change. FDR came in, and he did effect a lot of change. Criticisms of his policies. He invaded individual liberties by getting so much government control into the businesses. Social Security, that was passed during his administration, was supposed to be a short-term fix. It was supposed to be a Band-Aid for the times. It was not supposed to continue. And it was understood that if you didn't want to continue it, you weren't supposed to have to continue it. That for the government to tell you that you have to pay us into a savings account to help you for your retirement. That invades my individual right of deciding what I want to do with my money, because it's not supposed to be a tax. Did not balance the budget. This is when we're going to start to find a serious problem. We have been balancing the budget pretty much up till then. And since FDR, we've balanced it once, just once, where we have been balanced, haven't spent more than what we have. It's been a real roller coaster ever since. Under FDR, our national debt grew by leaps and bounds. Beyond several of the presidents, if you had added several presidents together, they didn't create a national debt as great as what he did. Additionally, by setting up all these acts, NIRA, the AAA, it creates a bureaucracy. The base to the word bureaucracy is bureau. A bureau was a French piece of furniture, very, very large dresser. Most of us have a dresser with 4, maybe 5 drawers. A bureau is double-sided, has 2 or 3 rows of drawers, could be up to 10. It's very large. So bureaucracy means growing bigger and bigger. And the problem with this is that under bureaucracy, many departments are duplicating what another department is doing without even knowing that other department exists. The right hand does not know what the left hand is doing, and vice versa. It is an inefficient way to run a business, a government. It is too big. And despite all of his efforts to get the government back into business and to regulate business, he never gained the confidence of businessmen. And this is where we're going to see a lot of animosity between the business world and the government. Now, some of the good things, some of the pros. National income did rise. Okay? Farm prices did go up. Workers' wages will eventually increase, and they will have better hours because unions will become legal. They will be allowed to collectively bargain. So collective bargaining means using the power of all the members of your organization to bargain for whatever your demands are. Prior to this, unions had not been recognized as truly legal entities. So the government will increase its participation in our lives, in business, through Social Security. It will build low-income housing. It will provide for insurance on your bank deposits. What is it? FICA, federally insured. I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fart here. But the government is the first time that if you do put your money in the bank, you're going to be insured. So if anything does happen, you're going to get your money back. Recovery. Recovery is going to be slow. And true recovery is not going to be noticeable until World War II. But what so often happens during a war is someone will benefit. Someone comes out of it making money. And I'm not going to say that we made money off of World War II, but we are not the first ones to enter the war. When World War II begins, we are going to enter 2 years, a good 2 years into the war. And those 2 years that the war was going on over in Europe, we're going to benefit from it. And we're going to ramp up. And when our men go overseas, our women are going to take jobs. Our women are actually going to help run this economy, keep it alive. But that is going to be for you to read about when that comes up next. Thank you for joining me with this lecture. I hope you were able to hang in there. I know I'm a fast talker. Just keep hitting pause and go back and take your notes again. Thanks.